I hate the term gossip and drama because it seems to be only gossip and drama when oppressed people are saying it. As a content creator that makes content about the royal family, just trying to understand the media propaganda machine that they have developed for decades, created by the monarchy, but especially by Charles Windsor. A lot of media that discusses the royals will talk a lot about this idea of gossip or drama going around. But also, the PR firms of the royal family are honing in on a very specific demographic through its royal experts and royal correspondents, and that's women. You think interest in the monarchy, you think women, you think women's magazines. There's some bad journalism as well, but there's also women's magazines. There's a lot of celebrities in here, but they're in there. They're in there. See if you can spot them. There you go. These types of magazines, you know who you associate picking these up at the grocery store. They are intentionally courting a female demographic. And sometimes if it's convenient, an LGBTQ demographic, but not all the time, because we can't be messing with our right-wing base. Our diehard loyalists can't be looking at this or this. Hide this from our most diehard fans. The words gossip and drama have become almost sort of queer-coded, female-coded, POC coded in our culture, but it kind of dismisses this idea of media being coded for women as being like inherently distrustworthy. The weird thing is that the royal family's PR is what's making it disinformation and untrustworthy. That means that a lot of royal discussions get lumped in with all of that misinformation and disinformation that the royal family itself is putting out, which means that it kind of gets dismissed as just all gossip and inherently untrustworthy if it's passed around through female coded spaces or any other oppressed coded spaces, I guess. It's unreal. These royal sources, these PR arms coming from the monarchy, from the crown, from the head of state, are deliberately inserting themselves into these sort of female-coded spaces and pumping out misinformation and disinformation. And reading them with a critical eye, which is what I do on my channels, we can see a kind of bigger picture emerging of what this sort of propaganda campaign really looked like through these media outlets that were associated with the Royal Rota and just other journalists regurgitating the same misinformation, as well as what they accidentally reveal by towing the party line and saying exactly what the palace tells them to say, which accidentally raises a whole bunch of questions when you realize all of these stories don't add up and they don't paint the picture that they think that it does. If you know anything about the alt-right pipeline, you know how easy it is for media to radicalize people, especially men in the case of the alt-right pipeline. But this royal propaganda machine is mostly affecting women and other marginalized community spaces. And it's being controlled by the most powerful man in the British government. This ain't gossip. These people are admitting to crimes in PR. They're admitting to intimidation and harassment. They are admitting that this institution is merely for pretty pictures and that nothing else matters except for what everybody is seeing on the outside. And yet they hoard billions of pounds of wealth, engage in these female-coded, queer-coded, POC-coded, working-class coded spaces. It's not gossip. It might be how your monarchy actually works. Like I've said before on this channel, everything about the monarchy is a grift, and what better way to encapsulate that grift by looking at royal memorabilia. Here are just a few choice pictures that I've taken on my visit to the UK. Most of these were found in charity shops, but some of them were not. I saw this mug in a charity shop from the Jubilee. I think, what is it, 1977? Is that golden? Something like that. Pretty classy, honestly. Doesn't look too tacky, but still, like, I'm not really sure why you would buy this. I also found not one, but two of this mug in particular in two different charity shops, which was made to commemorate the marriage between Charles and Diana. Kind of goes to show you that this type of memorabilia just isn't worth anything, right? Like, most people like that want to collect things that will appreciate in value, but buying tat like this is just like, it's not worth it. It's not going to increase in value. Nobody wants it, and if you're really unlucky, it will become horribly dated. There's another one I found for Charles and Diana's wedding. Different style, I guess, but similar kind of vibe. This side of the mug looks quite, you know, classy, but I mean, it's still like, why do you want these people on a mug? Like, for £3.50 now, like, this was probably worth like 10 quid when they bought it. We have this coin collection here. British Mint loves to do this kind of thing where they print coins specifically for different events for the monarchy. This one is just a coin collection. It's kind of cool, but also a little bit, what? And here we have two more in another charity shop, one for the 80th birthday of the Queen and one for the Golden Jubilee. This style of royal memorabilia, like, I just don't get it. Like, to me, it looks very tacky. It looks like somebody wants something that looks kind of expensive but isn't. I think just the big question in my mind is, why does the royal family get involved in marketing this kind of crap? Like, do they really need your money? You know? And last but certainly not least was this that I found in the reduced section. A bunch of different bears that just say Her Majesty the Queen on it and has her birth and death dates on it. Just like, who would you give this to and why would you give it to them? I don't understand. And then this biscuit tin of King Charles. Like, who's eating biscuits and is like, you know what I really need? To see King Charles's face as I eat some biscuits with my tea. But in thinking more about this question, I stumbled across this pretty interesting article by Richard Morgan from Morning Brew titled "The Uncertain Future of Royal Merchandise. The Queen has fueled the mini economy for decades. Can it survive Charles?" And the author of the piece basically notes that when you go to buy any merchandise for King Charles, it just doesn't exist because it doesn't sell. Because King Charles does not sell the monarchy very well as a whole, and he certainly can't support his own, like, brand image. He writes, "Put plainly, the Queen was the British monarchy, and without her, international interest in the Windsors seems uncertain, as does the entire business of selling royal merchandise." According to the article, the British public spent £282 million on memorabilia for the Platinum Jubilee and nearly £134 million on merchandise for William and Kate's wedding. And the big question in the room for me is why? Why do people want to buy this merchandise? And keep in mind, some of this is through, like, you know, unofficial sellers and stuff like that. But the monarchy itself has its own merchandise. This is the monarchy's official merchandising website. They sell this directly to consumers, and you're thinking, like, why? Why do they need people's money like this? It just seems so grifty. Like, they're not happy with just getting taxpayer money. They want to convince people to buy things from them, and it's not cheap. You'd think for what taxpayers are actually paying for this family, everybody in the country should be able to get a voucher for like one mug from the website. But back to King Charles. Basically, the article posits that because Charles's image has yet again had to go through this new rehabilitation, what with like the crown bringing up all the Charles and Diana stuff again, and plus him just being like an unlikable character, he doesn't have, quote, the it factor to sell merchandise, to the point where most shops just don't carry anything with his name on it. Even this crazy royal fanatic that they talk to in the article basically says that she would not buy anything with Charles's face on it, and she's like, don't even get me started on Camilla. When Morning Brew inquired about Camilla merchandise at gift shops, the responses ranged from laughter to, in one instance, being asked to leave the shop. But it goes on to talk about a really interesting part about royal memorabilia, which is that The type of memorabilia that's actually worth something is things that like have misprints on it, or things that are really rare, like these coronation cups for Edward VIII's coronation, which never actually happened because he abdicated. And this is the big part of the grift, right? When you're selling this type of merchandise, you're kind of hoping that people will like buy into this idea that it's like valuable in some way, that it might increase in value, or that it should like maintain its value in some way. But in most cases, it's not. It's not going to increase or even maintain its value at all, because it's just a bunch of crap that's been mass marketed to a huge group of people. It's just the same gimmick that's been used to market like collectible dolls or collectible coins and all of this stuff. This hope that it's going to increase in value, that it's going to be worth so much because it's labeled collector worthy. But that's not how collections work. Collections that like increase in value are increasing in value because they are rare, not because they are marketed as collectible. The article goes on to note, quote, they have emotional value. And that's the whole thing, right? This memorabilia is playing on people's emotions and trying to get them emotionally invested in the monarchy, in these ideas, and form an emotional attachment that's going to get people to spend their hard-earned pounds on basic crap that they don't actually need. Things that'll just end up in a charity shop 20 years later, or in the reduced section of your local Boots. Seriously though, if you find any royal memorabilia that's like absolutely ridiculous and stupid, please tell me about it, because I will probably buy it just for the lols. Okay, Brits, ignore my wet hair for a moment. I'm going to teach you a new word, because I swear, any discussion I get into at the pub or at social gatherings about politics and the monarchy goes exactly the same way. And the word is whataboutism. See, here's how conversations typically go. Me. Yeah, it's pretty messed up that you're only represented by one single MP in your government, and if they decide to pull in Nadine Dorries, you can't do anything about it? Isn't it bizarre that you happily accept that your head of state and commander-in-chief is in charge for life, and you don't even take the time to know anything about him? It seems like you don't really have a democracy when you don't have a voice in who the PM is for like a decade. And without fail, the Brit on the opposite end says something like, "But you elected Trump. Why the Republicans so crazy, lol. You've got no right to speak. All your politicians believe in QAnon and UFOs." Whataboutism, from Oxford English Dictionary. The technique or practice of responding to an accusation or difficult question by making a counter-accusation or raising a different issue. Are Brits just so politically unaware that they don't even know how to engage in a political discussion without bringing up the United States of America? Like, you really think that when we're talking about the basics of how British governance is undemocratic, that arguing with an American about how some random cult leader who was president for only 4 years before being indicted 4 times is gonna make me reconsider buying into the entire British system of lords and ladies and kings and queens and all other posh nonsense? You really think not critically thinking or engaging with the fundamentals of democracy is gonna cut it? Motherfucker, we had 250 years of philosophizing on democracy and good governance. Common Sense was written in 1775. I can read a hard copy of our Constitution. I could tell you in about 3 Schoolhouse Rock songs how our system represents, mostly, the will of the people. These Brits probably couldn't even tell me how a bill becomes a law in their own country, and they certainly can't come up with a coherent argument for sustaining a monarchy that they don't take the time to research at all. Why are you bringing up the US? How about you tell me how your government works first before you go criticizing mine? I'm sorry, but the British brainworms are just so strong sometimes. The propaganda has gotten in so deep that your government has trained you like good little pups to point to the US to disparage the fundamental pillars of democracy while making you believe somehow that the UK is one. Pathetic. Okay, I have to stop everything for this vid. So my partner and I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole looking at the British citizenship test. Just to give you an idea of what I thought it would be, Here are some examples of questions on the U.S. citizenship test.
What are two rights of everyone living in the United States of America? We elect a US senator for how many years? What's a US senator? What signs bills to become laws? The idea of self-government is in the first three words of the Constitution. What are these words?
And here's the UK.
When did the Battle of the Boyne happen? Was it 1690? Was it 1695? Was it 1693 or 97? What is the Mercury Music Prize awarded for? Which British TV shows are popular in the UK? How I Met Your Mother, Friends, Coronation Street, or The Big Bang Theory?
Coronation Street?
Bazinga. What were the Canterbury Tales about? Next up, we have what is the divine right of kings? We have reduced the power of the king, increased the power of parliament, the king was appointed by God, or reduced the power of the nobles.
The king was appointed by God.
You are killing it. We're down to the final one. You get this right.
I don't know who's Andy Murray.
What?
I don't know who's Andy Murray.
And it's just bad. Like, it's just so bad. It's just like a pub quiz on like random British history and culture. But I did not guess that this life in the UK test was full-on propaganda. First, the test relies on answers that are found in this book written by the Home Office called Life in the UK. And you have to buy it on their website and order a physical copy of the book or steal it. Now, there are a lot of factual inaccuracies with this test, which has been highlighted quite a few times. But I found this video from Labour Social called The UK Citizenship Test is a Disaster. And I highly encourage you to watch the whole thing because it was very eye-opening for me, but there's just one part of it that I want to show. And it's how the monarchy is portrayed on the test.
Obviously, there's a new head of state, and obviously it's been fairly recent. It's less than a year, and we probably can't expect the test to well, since they print it. Well, yeah, if it was on a line, it could be done on the day. However, online, when you go to only people who look to buy the book, only those who will go to buy the book can see the erratum that they have published, noting that there are two things that no one will be asked about on the citizenship test, despite the fact the test handbook has it in there for you to memorize. One is you are not required to know anything about Britain's head of state. You don't need to know who the head of state is, or their name, or what the role is. Nothing about the head of state.
That should be the first question, though, if it was up to date.
People who are Republicans will argue that you need to know who the head of state is, because that's, as far as I know, you know, not every country might be up to date on the current name, but that you don't even need to know the position of the head of state, I think makes Britain's test unique in the world in a very bad way. We're the only test that you do not need to know who the head of state is. And a very senior, and not a Labour peer in House of Lords told me that she was alarmed about this, because she said, but of course, Tom, if you pass the fool test, and you get through to citizenship, what do you need to do? You need to swear lifelong loyalty to the head of state. But then you don't need to know who it is to be British, but then you have to swear your undying, forever allegiance to this.
I swear my undying allegiance to this product or service.
And this is all coming from a group of folks who bang on about British values, and do people coming across on small boats have British values, and they care very much about British values, and we need to preserve these things. Meanwhile, we know what needs to know who the head of state is, even though you need to swear your life to that person. Anyway, that's the relatively small thing.
Yeah.
The propaganda is strong. So in order to be British, you have to swear undying loyalty to the head of state. And the current head of state is Charles Windsor, head of a vast fortune, a cruel and abusive man, and the leader of a family blogging empire. But you don't need to know he's the head of state, or anything about him for that matter. If you're British, do you really want to be treated like a fucking idiot by your own government? Engage in royal family tea and drama. Listen to stories from inside the institution and people that have left the cult. Learn who these people are, and especially learn who King Charles III is, considering that you're expecting immigrants to your country to pledge their life to him. Doesn't that mean that you are unquestioningly pledging your life to him as a British citizen? Maybe you should know who he is then.